and was in pain to be delivered. He does not say this because she was to give birth in bodily pain, for that is not possible in this divine parturition, but because it was to be a great sorrow for that mother to see that divine infant come forth from the secrecy of her virginal womb, in order to suffer and die as a victim for the satisfaction of the sins of the world. For this queen could know and did know all this beforehand by her knowledge of the Holy Scriptures. On account of the natural love of such a mother for such a son, she must be deeply afflicted thereby, although in subjection to the will of God. In this pain was also foreshadowed the sorrow of this most gentle mother at the thought of being deprived of the presence of her treasure, after he should have issued from her virginal womb. For although her soul always enjoyed his presence as to his divinity, yet she was to be a long time without his bodily presence, according to which he was exclusively her son. The Most High had determined to exempt her from guilt, but not from the labors and sorrows corresponding to the reward which was prepared for her. Thus the sorrows of this birth were not the effect of sin, as they are in the descendants of Eve, but they were the effect of the intense and perfect love of the Most Holy Mother for her divine Son. All these mysteries were motives of praise and admiration for the good angels, and the beginning of punishment for the bad angels. And there was seen another sign in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head were 7 diadems, and his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and cast them to the earth. Thereupon followed the punishment of Lucifer and his allies, for after uttering his blasphemies against the woman, who had been symbolized in the heavenly sign, he found himself visibly and exteriorly transformed from a most beautiful angel into a fierce and most horrid dragon. He reared with fury his 7 heads, that is, he led on the 7 legions or squadrons of all those that followed and fell with him. To each principality or congregation of these followers he gave a head, commanding them to sin on their own account, and undertake the leadership in the 7 mortal sins, which are commonly called capital. For in these are contained the other sins, and they constitute, as it were, the regiments that rise up against God. They are the sins called pride, envy, avarice, anger, luxury, intemperance, and sloth. They are the 7 diadems with which Lucifer, after being changed into a dragon, was crowned. This is the punishment with which he was visited by the Most High, and which he acquired as a return for his horrible wickedness for himself and for his confederate angels. To all of them were apportioned the punishment and the pains, which corresponded to their malice, and to the share which they had in originating the 7 capital sins. The 10 horns were the triumphs of the iniquity and malice of the dragon, and the vain and arrogant glorification and exaltation which he attributed to himself in the execution of his wickedness. In his depraved desire of attaining the object of his arrogance, he offered to the unhappy angels his malicious and poisonous friendship and his counterfeit principalities, commanderships, and rewards. These promises, full of bestial ignorance and error, were the tail with which the dragon drew after him the 3rd part of the stars of heaven. These angels were the stars, and if they would have persevered, they would have shone with the rest of the angels and the just, like the sun through the perpetual eternities. But the punishment which they merited drew them down to the earth of their unhappiness, into its very center, which is hell, where they will for all eternity be deprived of light and happiness. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to be delivered, that when she should be delivered, he might devour her son. The pride of Lucifer was so boundless that he pretended to place his throne on high, and with the utmost boasting he spoke in presence of the woman symbolized in the heavenly sign. This son, which that woman is to bring forth, is of lower nature than mine. I shall devour him and destroy him. I shall lead on my followers against him. I shall spread my doctrines against his decrees and against the laws which he shall set up. I shall wage perpetual war and contradiction against him. But the answer of the Most High Lord was that this woman was to bring forth a man-child who was to reign over the nations with an iron rod. This man, the Lord added, shall be not only the son of that woman, but he shall also be my son, true God and true man, gifted with power to overcome thy pride and crush thy head. He will be to thee and to all those who hear and follow thee a powerful judge, who shall rule thee with a rod of iron and bring to naught all thy vain and aspiring thoughts. This son shall be taken up to my throne, where he shall be seated at my right hand as judge, and I will place his enemies for a footstool beneath his feet, in order to triumph over them. He will be rewarded as the just man, who, being at the same time true God, has done so much for his creatures. All shall know him, and shall give him reverence and honor. But thou, as the most unhappy, shalt know what is the day of the wrath of the All-Powerful. This woman too shall be placed in solitude, where she will have a place assigned by me. This solitude, to which the woman fled, is the position which our great Queen holds, as being only and alone, unsurpassed in sanctity and exempt from all sin. For she, being of the same nature as mortals, far excelled all the angels in grace, merits, and gifts attained in common with them. Thus, she who was the only one, and without a compeer among creatures, fled and was placed in a solitude exalted above all the rest. This solitude was so far removed from all sin that the dragon could not even attain sight of it, nor could he from the time of her conception discern anything of her. The Most High placed her alone, and as the only one in the world who never had intercourse with and never was in subordination to the serpent. On the contrary, with solemn promise and assurance, he affirmed and decreed, "This woman, from the first instant of her existence, shall be my only one, chosen for myself. I exempt her even now from the jurisdiction of her enemies, and I will assign to her a position of grace most eminent and incomparable, in order that there she may be nourished 1,260 days. That number of days the Queen was to remain in an interior and spiritual state of most exalted and extraordinary graces, which were to be more memorable and wonderful. This happened in the last years of her life, as, with the help of God, I will relate in its place. In that state she was nourished in such a divine manner that our understanding will never be able to grasp it. And because these graces were in a certain measure the end toward which others of the life of the Queen of Heaven were ordained, and, as it were, their culmination, the evangelist makes a special mention of them.